us to redo the contract?
Right. Okay, we're going to talk. Okay, right. So I've started my video, so international the internet people hopefully can see me. Okay, so today is day 6 of the Expert in Teams Village. So what we've had today is mostly working again, so keeping working on your project and coming up with ideas. In the schedule, today and next week, they start talking about the midpoint of the course. Right? Now there are 2 things to discuss, and one thing we'll look at here, which is in the Expert in Teams. At this stage, they're suggesting that it is useful to look back at the work agreement, right? The agreement that you wrote with each other, and see if it is still current and up to date, right? That you are still following it, that there aren't breaches, that, you know, just to allocate some time to looking at the agreement and see if you are following that agreement, right? So that if there are things that are now wrong about it. Now, some theory behind group collaboration. They suggest that we look at the work of Roger Swartz, which is, so he has a commercial Roger Swartz and Associates management company, right? So, but he also writes about how to have good meetings, and so there is material from 2002 in the book, but I thought I'd go and grab his 2016 stuff, seeing he's been continually pushing more material. So if I just make that slightly larger, oh, it goes off the side of the page, right. I thought it might wrap better than that, but the current situation is that what he's saying is that to have good meetings, often there needs to be a set of basically ground rules, right, where you agree on the behaviour we'll have in good meetings. Right? Now, in this, so his list here of 8 steps are state views and ask genuine questions. Right? So when something is your view, you state what your position is, and you ask genuine questions, not just kind of questions to upset people or questions to show how much you know, but actually genuine questions where you want to learn more about what the person is, their point of view. You should share all relevant information. So for example, for the Mac students, in the last couple of weeks we've had a couple of examples. 2 weeks ago we had a paper where the author didn't disclose that they owned the company that they were reviewing. So they were reviewing the educational benefits of an online game, and they didn't state anywhere that they owned that game. So, which would be a conflict of interest, right? So if you have a particular vested interest in something, that should be disclosed, right? So you should share all the relevant information. Use specific examples and agree on what important words mean. Now, you guys are mostly English as second language speakers, which is both a benefit and a challenge. The benefit is that you don't come necessarily with a lot of baggage around what a word means, right? Because whereas English speakers will often have a lot of context around a word, and so we'll have subtly different meanings for each of the English speakers in the room, and none of them will realize that they have subtly different meanings for the words, right? Because no, everybody knows what that means. Whereas because English is a second language for you, A, you're likely to use simpler words, and B, you're less likely to have those additional meanings attached to the word. Right? What you do see is that Norwegians will occasionally do the transliteration thing and use the Norwegian version. They transliterate from English into Norwegian and use the meaning of the Norwegian word. Right? Now the French get really annoyed at you when you do this, when you say like, oh, magnificent is magnifique in French, so it must mean the same thing. Right? And the French hate you when you say, no, that's just an English word, you're just using it. Like, no, it means something else, it's our word, you stole it. So when you do that transliteration, sometimes you'll get the mistakes that will pop up in English language interpretation. So I had a long discussion with Marish around the word speculation versus investment, and exactly where that changes when something goes from being an investment into a speculation. Because in Polish, the word speculation has a very strong gambling component to it. Right? It is speculative in a gambling sense. But in English, you can speculate on things that aren't random, which you can't do in Polish. Right? But it's so those subtleties of what do we like if we're trying to decide whether we're going to invest in something. If we didn't have the same meaning for the word invest, that could make things very difficult, right? Because we wouldn't be agreeing, we wouldn't be discussing the same thing. So that's why I think, I completely agree that it's important to agree on what word means, right? What words mean. I often find that this is something I have to discuss with English speakers regularly, is that, oh, you mean that with that word? That's strange. Explain reasoning and intent. So one of the things that is difficult to do when you first start working with other people is to narrate your own thought process, right? Is to be able to say why you've asked something, right? Not just ask the question, right? But actually say, oh, I'm asking this because I want to know this piece of information, right? Or I'm coming at it for this reason, right? So actually making explicit your intent, right? And so explain the reasoning and the intent is to say, well, okay, the reason why I'm asking, like, why is it pink, is actually I'm worried that you're potentially targeting at only girls or women because you believe that pink is a girl colour. So I'm concerned that that's why it's pink, right? So I could make explicit why I've asked you a question rather than just say, well, why is it pink, with an implicit kind of like justify yourself. I could actually say why I'm asking that question. Focus on interests, not positions. Here, this is partly because if you guys all assume that your group is trying to achieve the same thing, right? Some of you might have one position on it, some of you might have another position, but so long as your intent, right? So if we intend to teach students well, I might believe labs are better than lectures, and another lecturer might believe lectures are better than labs, right? But rather than focus on I will defend labs and he will defend lectures and get into an argument about that, we focus on, no, we want to teach students well. So let's focus on the intent, and then our positions are malleable because we share intent. Right? So test assumptions and inferences. This is very hard to test your own assumptions, so sometimes it's best if you do this for other people. So if you're making assumptions about how old people respond to things, oh, they'll be scared of technology. Well, have you actually checked with any actual old people whether they're scared of technology, or is that just a myth that you have in your mind? Right? And actually you'll find that, you know, old people are like other people, that there's a range, and there's actually a whole senior group, which is SeniorNet, which is just about, you know, people over the age of 70 on the net using Facebook and Twitter and being an American president over the age of 70 using Twitter quite a lot, right? So they test your assumptions, jointly design the next steps, and discuss discuss undiscussable issues. Now I already did this when you talked about when I talked about anal sex, and you said that would never come up in this course, and so we had a discussion of why VR does make that happen, right? That's an example of discussing an undiscussable topic, right? Is actually sometimes it's important to step through that and move on from just saying, well, we can't discuss that, to saying, well, actually maybe we can. He then says that you won't go into so even if you do all of the ground rules things, right, you have all of that kind of agreeing, and you know what terms mean, and you've jointly designed steps. He says you won't fully reach your group's potential, because, you know, this is management speak, so that's often how they phrase things. explicitly agree on ground rules and what each one means, right? So you've done that, you've written your work agreement, but the idea here is you should also all agree on what those statements mean. Develop a team mindset that's congruent with the ground rules. Okay, so what that means is that you should internalize your rules, right? Those rules shouldn't be there to restrict what you do. You should think in that way, right? You should try and change the way you think, so that the reason I'm sharing this information is not just because, oh, it's in the rule and I have to do what's in the rule, but because I see the value of sharing, right? So it's kind of owning, becoming happy with that. And the last two, so agree that everyone is responsible for helping each other use the ground rules. So you shouldn't see this as a I'm here to try and catch you out using the ground rules. Okay, so I said, ha, you got it wrong, because you didn't do this, haha, I've got you. No, this, like, not the intent is not a find the fault. You should say, oh, hey, like, you need to do a bit more of this. So can we find out why this happened, or can we help you make this a bit easier to do, right? So you should be trying to help each other do better rather than catching each other out, and discuss how you are using the ground rules to improve, right? So you can actually recognize that what you've said as your group behavior is helping you be a better group, right? So those are the kind of Swartz's advice on group behavior, right, and how to make better groups. So in reflecting on your collaborative agreements, basically the expert team suggests that looking at these to see, you know, are these rules still in agreement? Do you all believe these? Have you started behaving in that way? Have you kind of internalized any of those rules and you actually started doing that more in your group? And are there ways that you can help each other be better in your groups as group members? Now, as some of our groups have said already this morning, they've not had enough conflicts for there to be problems yet. So, and it was suggested that expert in teams does seem to assume that you guys are all assholes to each other all the time. And that your goal is to do as little as possible and to make the group fail as quickly as possible. And so we need all these rules to make sure that you're not screwing each other over, right? So I had this discussion with lecturers at NTNU in Trondheim last year, when we were discussing how to get students to do extra tasks, right? So in the first year game course, I suggest activities and students do those activities because they're fun and related to games. And in third year, I suggest students do things and they do them because they want to learn. And when I said, well, and the Trondheim guys were saying, well, the problem we have is that unless it's mandatory, as in you'll fail unless you do it, or it's graded, none of their students will do anything they suggest to do. Right? The only thing students will do is they've optimized entirely to mandatory and graded. Anything else, they'll ignore. Right? So if you say, hey, you'll learn if you do this, the students will never do it. Right? And so for me, if that's the culture, if your culture is only do things that are written down and contractually required to do, right, by mandatory in the course or graded, if your whole focus is minimizing to just what's in the contract, then I certainly see why in expert teams they have this large focus on, you better write everything down in the contract or none of you will do anything, right? Because it's not in the contract, whoop, not going to do it. So I think partly this approach of being very heavily contractual comes from a culture that requires heavy written contracts before anybody does anything. Okay? Now, in my undergraduate here, we don't have that culture. Some of you from international environments may well have come from a culture very strongly like that. Is that recognizable to people, that there is this, like some Americans are a bit like that, right? It's not in the contract. Ha ha! I can screw you over because you didn't write this down. So ha ha. And you know they get quite lawyered up and and litigious in this sense, right? There's weird things in Norway, like verbal contracts are binding.
Yes.
Yes, yes, really, verbal contracts are binding. Email is binding contract.
I think email is binding in the US, but verbal contracts, unless you can prove it.
Yeah, that's a problem.
No, there's like that in Norway as well. Like it is as valid as legit as a written contract. It's just how you prove it.
Yeah.
But if you can prove it, then it's
and often the judges will go on a best evidence, what we believe was the agreed contract, rather than what can be proven, right? So there is actually, it's harder to screw people over in Norway by lying to them. But those different cultures require different amount of specificity over what you do, right? I found it a little bit strange coming to Norway that when I arrived, so in New Zealand we have work to rule as a first step in industrial negotiations, right? So when the union is trying to negotiate salaries with the bosses, one of the things they do is they say, right, we're negotiating, negotiations have broken down, so we're going to work to rule, which means we only do exactly what's written in our contract. Right? That's the first stage of industrial dispute. Right? So that's when we're angry and we're no longer willing to just get things done. We're only going to do what's explicitly in our contract. In Norway, I came here and it seemed that was the default. That, you know, what as a good worker, what you did was only what was written in your contract, and you never did anything more than that. Right? And so when we had to fix our house, when we had a water leak in our house, the plumber came in, looked at it and said, oh, well, you need a builder to take the wall down. So he went, then a builder came to take the wall down, the plumber came back to fix the plumbing, then he went away and the builder came in to put the wall back in. I mean, what? Why do you, like, it's just a wall, why can't you just take it down, fix the plumbing and put it back? Right? But no, that's a builder's job. I'm not a builder, I'm a plumber.
He's not allowed.
He's not allowed, because that's not in what his job description is.
No, just not allowed because it's technical rules for such.
Yeah.
So yeah, then and that's what Norway does, is they make rules around what people are allowed to do, right? And so you get these very, very fine, and so you have a kind of work to rule mentality, because the rules are so strong that saying, well, you know, you're not legally allowed to do this, or you're not allowed to do that, because, you know, we've got to have rules around this and this and this and this. And so if you do more than what's in your contract, then you're at fault, right? So it felt very strange coming from an, oh, we'll just get it done environment to a, no, there's a person for that. Only that person's allowed to do that. I won't do anything more than written in my contract. Right? So it felt strange for me coming into that environment. So what I'm suggesting here, and why I bring this up, is because for you guys writing contracts, understanding that different cultures come from different perspectives, right? In my contract, in my culture, basically, you know, we're all trying to get it done. We don't really need the strong rules unless things start falling apart and someone starts doing things wrong. So you have some rules there, but you kind of follow them until things start failing. Whereas other cultures might look at those and say, right, I'll only do what's there. So you better make sure that everything I'm going to do is there, or else I'm out. Right? So understanding that there might be these different cultures in your groups is also quite important. Okay? So now one of the other things we need to check up in this morning is that next week, right, we will be having presentations from the groups. I warned you last week that this might happen. So on the Blackboard page, there is the compendium for theory on expert and teams. If you have a look, I believe you guys have access to the compendium in the Blackboard.
Yeah, I showed them
I think it's
the other day, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was on the web page as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're kind of pushy. so the compendium, so each group has to volunteer to do one of those compendium presentations. So I'll let you guys read over those today and then volunteer by the end of the day which one you will do. Okay, so have a wee scan over them, feel which one you're comfortable presenting, and then we'll sort out at the end of the day who will be presenting which paper next week. Okay, so that's your job today. Have a look at the compendium. You don't have to read the full, read every word of every paper before you make your decision. But the idea here is that this will give you more theoretical background for discussing reflections and discussing your group work. Okay. So the rest of today is working on your projects and reviewing your contracts, and then we'll have a check-in at the end of the day where I'll get groups to say which one they'll present. Okay? And so the rest of the day is for you guys to work. Any questions? No, that's all clear. I'll put a link to this latest short stuff online. I'm afraid unfortunately I saw Spaceballs on TV a few weeks ago. I was flicking channels and I saw it, and Schwartz, may the Schwartz be with you. Unfortunately that's the word they use in Spaceballs, and so that kept popping up when I so yes, unfortunately in English that's one of the problems, is words have other meanings and people co-opt them. So I'll put a link to the right Schwartz online. Okay, so have a good day. Okay, and I'll close off. Wait. Stop. No, stop.